Hello everyone, thanks for joining me. This is Dr. Whimsy, your favorite naturopath, answering all your questions about how to stay healthy from 40, 50, 60 and beyond. And for those of you who are just now finding this channel, this is a channel where I, as a naturopathic doctor, answer all your questions about natural medicine. And specifically, we focus on how to stay healthy as long as possible. If you're under the age of 40, you'll find plenty of topics here for young people as well. But basically, we focus on how to stay healthy from 40, 50, 60, and beyond. And I love questions, so feel free to ask me anything you like. And I'm shooting this in Los Angeles, in the heart of Los Angeles, right here in West Hollywood, where I practice several days a week. If you'd like to make an appointment, absolutely do so. My information is below. I also take telemedicine appointments for people who have general health questions and just want to be on protocols for optimal health. We do that as well. So today's subject is going to be about the process of aging. How do we age? Why do we age? And is there anything we can do to slow down the aging process? I'm going to address three theories, three general arguments about why we age and what we think people can do in terms of lifestyle choices to slow down this process. So we're going to look at three reasons why we believe people age and then some general guidelines that most doctors agree can be helpful in terms of slowing down the process of aging. So, number one, the first reason why we think people age has to do with cell damage. This is the cell damage theory, the belief that the cells are being damaged and consequently they die. They cannot repair themselves. An example of this would be exposure to the sun, exposure to radiation, that causes the cells to die on the skin, on the face, due to that constant exposure. I'm notorious for not wearing sunscreen, which, by the way, is one of the best things you can do if you're worried about sun exposure. That is my own personal naughty. I sometimes do forget to put on sunscreen, but that isn't a typical example of what we would call a cell death, cell damage that is leading to the aging process. So you go out into the sun, you're exposed to those UVB rays, and the skin is damaged, and we start to see crevices. And those crevices or those wrinkles are places where the cells have died due to that damage, and so consequently we now have wrinkles. Chemical exposure has also been examined. This is one of the reasons why naturopathic doctors will often focus on what's called an environmental assessment. If you go to my channel and you look at the videos, you can take a look at how we do an environmental assessment to determine if there's any kind of exposures in your home that could be causing a health challenge. Stress, believe it or not, is another thing that we look at. The process of being stressed can have a huge impact on health, not just physical health, but mental health. Chronic stress can cause changes in our hormones, elevations in cortisol. This can in turn cause changes in our blood sugar. Adrenal function can be affected, and even heart function can be affected by chronic stress. So we really want to look at stress as one of those factors, one of those key factors that can lead to cell damage and cell death. Oxidative stress is something we also look at. Oxidative stress, that's where you're literally burning fuel. While we want you to exercise, for example, we know that when you exercise, you burn more fuel, and when you burn more fuel, you have more oxidative stress. So we always tell people if they're exercising a lot, you want to increase your consumption of antioxidants. We'll talk a little bit about that a little later in this video. So the action of burning fuel, and that, by the way, also includes consuming more calories. When we consume more calories, our body is taking on more fuel that has to be burned. We may not be burning fuel effectively, but we're taking on more calories that have to be processed, which is stress on the body, and then theoretically those calories would be burned, which would be more oxidative stress. We've already talked about radiation. Radiation, as I said, coming from the sun, but there's other ways that cells can be damaged. Common medical equipment like a CT scan or an X-ray would have radiation. The second theory of why we age is called the Hayflick theory of aging, and this is the telomere shortening theory that a lot of research has come up about this. The idea here is that Dr. Hayflick believed that our cells could only divide about 50 times before they began to degrade and die. Now, one of two things is going to happen after that cell has gone through 50 successful divisions. It will simply cease to be able to divide and die, and again, you might see wrinkles because that cell line has simply died out. The other option is that the cell becomes immortal. The cell continues to have these long telomeres and continues to divide. In the telomere shortening theory by Dr. Hayflick, a normal cell will begin to divide, and the anchors that separate the DNA between those two cells are the telomeres. They look like strings that are dividing those two cells and then allowing them to form two cells from that single cell. That process of division with those anchoring strings known as telomeres, they begin to shorten every single time that cell divides. Consequently, the cell can no longer divide because the telomeres become too short, and we have what's called an abnormal cell. At that point, the cell performs what's known as apoptosis, basically commits suicide. That's a normal process, and that cell line has now left it. We no longer have that cell able to reproduce. In the case of cancer, though, a cancer cell never has a shortening of the telomeres, and so it continues to divide and create other cells that can divide. And so we have the continued growth of cancer. That apoptosis never takes place. And so the telomere shortening theory, Dr. Hayflick's theory, is one that certainly has been researched. What can we do to minimize or to help support the cell's ability to divide healthfully more times? That is the whole hypothesis of the telomere theory. You can also do telomere testing to find out if you have shortened telomeres, and we can get a rough idea of what your real age is theoretically by looking at telomeres. Getting on a good naturopathic protocol where we optimize your nutrition, your exercise, we help to reduce stress, seems to have a beneficial effect on the length of telomeres. And finally, the last theory I wanted to talk about is calorie restriction. We've done the blue zone research. They've looked all over the world, and one of the commonalities is not just that these cultures are eating less animal products and instead eating a mostly plant-based. They're not 100% plant-based, let's be clear about that, but they're getting into about the 90% of the plate, or 90% of the caloric intake, depending upon who you speak to, is plant-based. And we're also seeing in those cultures calorie restriction. Simply eating less food is causing less oxidative stress. And so we really want to emphasize eating more nutrient-dense foods and calorie restriction. So, what are some basic ideas that most doctors are agreeing on when it comes to longevity studies? Well, number one, we want to reduce exposure to cell damage. That means making sure to do an environmental assessment, making sure that your home is clean of any chemicals or any toxins that may be leading to cell damage and cell death. Reducing stress, stress in the job, stress at home, financial stress, anything that's causing stress, really trying to reduce that stress. And we recommend people look into meditation technique to reduce stress, walking, yoga, etc. Just getting the stress down. In terms of oxidative stress, we've talked a lot about this, and we will again here. That has to do with being aware of what you put in your body, having nutrient-dense foods that are high in antioxidants, or what we call having a high ORAC value. And by eating foods that are more nutrient-dense, or what we call the superfoods, and I'll put the list below so you will know what foods have been found to be the most nutrient-dense, we can reduce the amount of oxidative stress that can lead to cell damage. And as we'd mentioned before, being aware of the type of fuel you're burning. So there's a difference between eating good, nutritious food, because burning fuel leads to oxidative stress, or eating foods that are rich in antioxidants. So yes, you are burning fuel, but you're burning fuel that's rich in antioxidants, which can reduce some of that cell damage. In terms of telomere shortening, some of the things that we're looking at is, again, foods rich in antioxidants, calorie restriction, exercise is something that has been a really interesting area of research, simply finding that when people are less stationary, out moving about, being active in their communities, stretching, exercise, cardio, etc., we see that that can have a dramatic effect on the length of telomeres. We also encourage people to eat diets that are rich in omega-3s. It doesn't have to come from animals. That can be chia, flax. There are vegetables even that have omega-3s. Soybeans, do not fear them. I think soybeans are just fine as long as you're not allergic to them. I recommend eating them in fermented form, because if you have trouble digesting them, you may be doing better in the fermented form. Broccoli as well is rich in omegas. Calorie restriction is something I've done a lot of research on. This is the idea of trying to reduce caloric intake. We also talk to people about something called intermittent fasting, where they may have their last meal be at, say, 6 o'clock and not eat again until the following morning at about 7 a.m. Simply reducing caloric intake, and when you do eat, making sure that it's a nutrient-dense food. Okay, so what kind of supplements do we recommend? Well, that really depends on your doctor and your personal background, what we're trying to heal. For example, if you're on certain medications, we want to make sure not to prescribe any herbs that either may be contraindicated because they clear the medication you're on, or potentiate, make the medication even stronger. You have to be aware of that. An example would be Coumadin. We would not give an herbal medication to somebody who's on Coumadin. So we really want to tailor what type of treatments we give to the individual. But those are just some things you can think about as you work towards that goal of being healthy from 40, 50, 60, and beyond. Calorie restriction, nutrient-dense diet, plenty of omega-3s, keep the cardio up, try and find ways to de-stress, and keep your social life positive and surrounded by good people. I want to thank you for watching this video of Dr. Whimsy, and I hope that I helped get you started on your path to staying healthy from 40, 50, 60, and beyond. Please reach out to me and ask me any questions about any subjects you'd like me to cover in the future. And if you'd like to find a naturopathic doctor in your area, one that's licensed to practice medicine as a naturopath, you can go to the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians, and they will find you a physician in your area. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.